Hello and a very warm welcome to the latest broadcast from the University of Glasgow, which today is for both staff and students. My name is Peter Aitchison. I'm Director of Communications and Public Affairs at the University, and over the next 40 minutes or so, we're going to try and address some of the many questions that you've sent in. We've got a bumper panel today. With me we have the Principal, Professor Sir Anton Muscatelli, Dr. David Duncan, the Chief Operating Officer and University Secretary, Scott Kirby, President of the SRC, Christine Barr, Director of Human Resources, Rachel Sandison, Vice Principal for External Relations, Ian Campbell, Executive Director of Estates, and also Moira Fischbacher-Smith, Vice Principal for Learning and Teaching. Welcome all of you. I want to start with you, Principal, first of all. We've had a number of very supportive messages for your regular video updates and the other communications which have been issued to staff and students, but there is real concern about the future. So bluntly, can we weather the storm caused by COVID-19 without any lasting damage to the University of Glasgow?
Oh, thank you, Peter. And it's good that this form of communication is helping colleagues to follow what is happening in the university. Let me try and give you a brief answer. I think it's good that as a university, we went into this crisis in a relatively healthy financial position, a position we've had for the last few years, and that's definitely a better position than many other universities in the sector, and that's a good place to be. The second point to make is what I've been saying to colleagues, and I shared this with our academic board, our Senate, just the other day. We want to ensure that we protect our staffing in the university as much as we can. It's a position we've taken partly because we know that the crisis will hopefully be temporary, and therefore we want to be in a position that when the recovery begins, we are able to respond to the needs of our students, the needs of the economy in terms of research and innovation. So we're trying to weather it in that way. The final thing I would say is clearly we are continuing to lobby government as well, because we know that the damage that's going to be caused to the sector is substantial in terms of potential lost income, and we are continuing to lobby the UK government, particularly, that has the fiscal room to do something very hard. Look, we cannot protect every activity in the university. I wish I could sit here today and say, we will protect absolutely everything we're doing. Now, I couldn't give you that commitment, but we will try to protect as much as we can our staffing levels, and we'll try to address the issue of recovery. We will have to therefore reduce our investment in a number of areas, whether it's areas like IT investment and maintenance in the short run, some of the other activities around travel and consumables. We are cutting those, but we are trying to prepare ourselves for the recovery.
Okay, well, a number of questions come in. This one from Erin, who said, will the university be open in September? Well, I know, Principal, you've actually been writing today about we've never actually closed, but can you address that? Will the university be open in September? Well, absolutely, Erin, but it's a very good question, because as you said, unfortunately, if you read some parts of the media, and there was even a report in the BBC a few weeks ago suggesting that, a couple of weeks ago, suggesting we were closed, and we've never been closed. You know, our COVID-related research has continued, our teaching has continued online, our examinations have continued online, to the point that actually 98% of our exams events have been completed as planned, which is pretty much the number of examinations that we've conducted even when we didn't have a COVID crisis, which has been a splendid effort. So really, I know my colleagues and our students have never been working harder, so we've never been closed. But actually, in terms of returning to campus, I know you'll get onto that, but we are working very hard to prepare a return to campus for all our research activity, and then eventually in the autumn for a hybrid form of learning, which will involve some face-to-face learning, as well as, of course, some continuation of online as long as the public health emergency continues. Well, you're right. We've got a lot of questions about the planned return to campus. So I'll pick up the first one with you, Dr. David Duncan, the Chief Operating Officer and University Secretary here. We've published a lot of information on the website over the past several weeks. There's recovery guides, there's a route map. We're in the process of designing a Moodle course to assist staff who are restarting activities on campus. How important is it that staff take time to look through these, to understand these, and to ask questions if they don't understand these guides and this collateral?
Well, it's very important. As you say, we've published quite a lot of stuff already. We've published a campus management plan, which is quite a detailed document, but also 5 shorter guides that are aimed at different audiences: staff, home workers, students, line managers, and so on. So we'd encourage everybody, if they can get access to those materials, to have a look at them. And as you say, we've already scripted an induction course, which we're going to ask all staff to do before they return to working on the campus over the coming weeks. And that will be available pretty soon.
Well, Ian Campbell from the States, can I pick up the safety issue? We've had a lot of questions in about safety. Gillian wants to know, are we going to see temperature checks? And others have asked about one-way systems and face coverings. Neem also asks if on-campus study spaces have to be adjusted to allow for physical distancing. By how much do you anticipate capacity to reduce? And if capacity does reduce, will it be first come, first served? Or will there be some kind of rota arrangement? So lots of questions about safety and the practical application of what happens when we come back to campus.
Yes, thanks Gillian and Neem for the questions. There's a lot in there, so I'll try and go through these in a logical order. So we're introducing a number of safety measures right across the campus in line with government advice. Physical distancing and hygiene improvements are central to that strategy. And in fact, signage and sanitation stations are being installed as we speak on the campus. Temperature checkers are being investigated. We're talking to various experts and providers in this field just to work out precisely how we'll apply that technology. But those will definitely be a supplement to the hygiene and distancing measures. In terms of our strategy, we're going to concentrate on the research buildings initially, and then move onto the teaching space in line with a route map that will be issued later this week. We've got to recognise as we return in the research facilities, we'll start off at relatively low capacities. Initially, we're looking probably about 20 to 30%. And as we learn more, these capacities will increase. Teaching spaces will all follow the blended teaching model as we've outlined before. And in those areas, we're actually mathematically modeling every space on the university in terms of both a 2 meter distancing rule and the 1 meter, just in case the government regulations change.
And that is very important, isn't it? Because if it's 2 meter, the capacity is much less than if it's 1 meter. So you're saying you're modelling both the 2 meter and the 1 meter?
We are modelling both. So broadly speaking, and people have seen plenty of this in the press already, is that capacities for, say, teaching space is around about 20% of full capacity at 2 meters. But can be up between 50 and 60% at 1 meter. So it makes quite a dramatic difference.
So we're modelling both so we can be nimble on either.
Yes, absolutely. We're clearly following government regulations at this point in time in terms of 2 meters, but there is plenty of debate going on as to whether it may reduce to the 1 meter, and we need to be ready to act upon that.
So I think the focus of a lot of what you've been talking about is probably main campus, Gilmer Hill, Garscube, but Ailey's asking about Dumfries. It's important we don't ignore Dumfries. Will the same regulations, will the same guidance be issued for Dumfries?
Yeah, the simple answer is yes. We're working closely with the College of Social Sciences to make sure that exactly the same principles apply in Dumfries as they do on the other 2 campuses.
And of course, we have got colleagues who don't work on any of our campuses. This one from Gillian, who asks about staff who work in NHS buildings, but she says the university is still responsible for our health and safety. Ian, are you happy that all staff and students are being given the same protection? Yes,
we've been, together with our colleagues in MVLS, been very much aware of this situation. And what we're doing is working with the NHS, building by building, because the management arrangements are different in each building, just to make sure that we're very clear on the respective responsibilities between the university and the NHS. What I can guarantee, though, is that the minimum standard will be the university standard.
Excellent, thank you. We've got a lot of student-focused questions coming in, and I'll come to you now, Rachel Sandison, Vice Principal for External Relations. Lots of questions on start dates, and I have to say a little bit of confusion anyway on some, on whether it will be September or for international students, January. Are you in a position to provide clarification? And there's also a specific question from two students, Yuran and Chi-Chi, who say they might not be able to get here from China by September. What advice and guidance can you give in the generality and also in that specific question, Rachel?
Well, thanks, Peter, and hello, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us today. Well, okay, I'm not happy that there is confusion, so I will most definitely try and provide some clarification in this response. As everyone will hopefully be aware, we announced just at the beginning of June our start dates for the next semester. And in really simple terms, for undergraduate students, there is no change. So if you're an undergraduate student, then the start dates are exactly as we had published. So the majority will be rejoining us on the 21st of September, unless you're an education student, whereby you will be starting a little bit earlier in August. At postgraduate top level, we have taken a stratified approach to start dates for this year, actually in support of our students and given the ever-changing external landscape. So whilst the majority of our postgraduate top programs will actually start as of the published start date of September 21st, we do have around 50 programs in our College of Medical, Veterinary and Life Sciences that will begin in November. We have a further 80-ish programs that will start in January 2021. And we also have approximately 30 programs that have dual start dates. So that means that actually students that are holding an offer, applicants that are holding an offer, will be able to choose whether they start in September or January. So we're providing some flexibility in that case. What I will say is that we've created a whole new set of FAQs for applicants and offer holders. So if you haven't already, I would strongly recommend you visit our coronavirus web pages, and you will see those FAQs where we actually link to all of the programs and provide very specific information on those start dates. The one thing that I will say, I understand actually the nervousness for some of our international students in being able to join the program in September. So specifically in response to Yuran and Cici, please don't worry about that. And we're very aware that this may be challenging. For September intake, actually you do have up until the 12th of October to register. So if there are any concerns about being able to join us in September, please do get in touch with us, because there are short extensions to registration deadlines that we are putting into place for all start dates. But also we can work with you to provide some individual advice and support as well if you're concerned about being able to start in September. It may also be the case that we can change your program to a January start program in a cognate discipline if you still have the same, if you still meet the same entry criteria. So huge amounts of flexibility that we are offering this cycle. And I would just push again, please do get in contact with us directly, get in contact with the admissions team if you have any queries or concerns at all, and we'll be able to come straight back to you with individual advice and guidance.
And I've looked through the FAQs and they are pretty exhaustive. So I think if you probably find the answer in the FAQs, but it is really helpful to know that people can reach out and that there are colleagues here willing, able, eager to answer their questions on their points. Well, Rachel, Catherine has been in touch and she said, students arriving from overseas in September will maybe still need to self-quarantine for 14 days on arrival. How will that be managed by the university?
Well, Catherine, I think first off, it's probably worthwhile saying that we really don't know what September will look like, and actually whether we will have a self-quarantining policy in place at that moment in time. Certainly there are suggestions that won't be the case, but of course, we cannot make any predictions at this moment in time. What I will say is that we are working very closely with Universities UK, with University Scotland, on formulating some guidelines for the sector as a whole as to how we would support students who are joining us at that time and have to self-isolate, as that will be government legislation. So we're thinking through what that means for halls of residence and how we support students in our own halls of residence. We're working out what that means in terms of travelling into Glasgow and things that we can put into place in terms of airport pickups. A lot of work that is being undertaken to ensure that we can accommodate and support students that are in that position of having to self-isolate on joining us in Glasgow. Of course, much more information that will be delivered over the course of the coming weeks and months, and also being very mindful that at this moment in time, we just don't know what that landscape will look like come September.
What about those students who may not want to come to Glasgow. Katrina is an international student. She's saying, will the university give the option, at least international students, to continue their studies remotely for 2020-21? So one for Rachel, and Scott Kirby, President of the SRC, you may want to come in on this one as well.
Okay, so I'll go first, and Scott, please feel free to jump in. I think it's really important to highlight and emphasize the fact that we are not delivering online programs for the next semester. We are delivering and committed to delivering blended learning. So that will be a mix of online and face-to-face. And I'm sure that Moira will have much more to say on that vein as well. We are going to have our facilities open, so we know we'll be opening a library and student support facilities on campus. And as already been indicated, again, we don't quite know what the world will look like come September. So we're committed to delivering as much face-to-face on-campus engagement as we possibly can. So, you know, we know what we can deliver right now within the parameters of the current legislation, but that may change and actually improve by the time that we get to September. So we are strongly encouraging students to make plans to physically join us in Glasgow, both in terms of the teaching and learning experiences that we hope to offer at that time, but also in terms of the social and community building opportunities that we hope to provide for our students as well. What I would also say is that if anyone does have real concerns about being able to make that happen, then again, please do get in touch with our admissions team. We'd be really happy to have a conversation with you about that and to provide additional support and information to you.
Scott from the SSC.
Yeah, I suppose just to pick up, I mean, I am highly sympathetic to students that are worried about attending next year, and we obviously have been getting messages from students exactly about this question. And you know, as Rachel said, the university is indicating, as many universities are in the UK, that they're going to take an approach to blended learning, something which you know, we did support in many ways. And I think it's just about managing those individual cases, as Rachel said, and getting in contact with the admissions team. It's obviously something that the SRC, as the independent student representative organisation, will take away and try navigate through the university with colleagues here. But you know, it's difficult to say right now because, you know, as a few people here have mentioned, we don't actually know what the world is going to necessarily look like come September. And I would hope that everyone is able to come and attend university physically and digitally. But to summarize, I do highly appreciate that it is difficult, and there are some students who are genuinely quite worried about doing that given their current circumstances, especially international students.
It is an uncertain world, and we really don't know what the position is going to be come September, October. But one thing I think we can be secure in, and that is that there'll be some form of blended learning. There'll still be face-to-face learning, but it'll be blended learning. And that leads on to a number of questions. Andrea asking Rachel, will tuition fees be lowered because there's going to be less face-to-face contact teaching?
So I think it's a really good question to ask. I know it's a question that's being asked across the sector right now of universities. We are entirely confident in the quality of what we will be delivering come September. So there will be no change to the high quality learning and teaching delivery. And as a result of that, there is no plans for us to look at changing fees, particularly as the fact that we hope very much that we'll be able to offer some real face-to-face opportunities in addition to what will be delivered virtually and remotely for that first semester. I do appreciate, though, individual concerns around fees and being able to pay for university. And what I would flag is that we are committed to providing additional financial assistance to students who find themselves in financial hardship. So, you know, although there are no changes to the fees, there are additional scholarships and bursaries available to students should they find themselves in a position of financial hardship. So I would definitely recommend looking at the website and finding out more details about those.
Well, that brings us on to learning and teaching and what that means. And Moira Fischbacher-Smith is the Vice Principal for Learning and Teaching. Moira, students are really interested. Lots of questions about what the learning experience is likely to be like next session. So what can you tell us at this stage?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that we're working really hard to ensure that the learning experience, even although it will be different, will be engaging and high quality. So there are still a number of questions that all universities need to answer in terms of how we respond to the government guidelines, and they're still emerging in terms of physical distancing on campus. But while they continue to emerge, and as Ian's already outlined, we're actively planning small group teaching, and in particular, and I think this is really important, specialist skills sessions, so laboratories, performance workshops, clinical sessions, things like that. We're planning for students to have as much on-campus experience as possible, and Rachel's just mentioned that too. And although we've still got a lot of details to work out and we don't have all the answers, we're certain that we'll be able to offer more and more teaching as the year progresses throughout the academic year. We do know that because of the limitations associated with physical distancing, larger group sessions like lectures aren't going to be possible on campus, and so we will deliver them remotely using Zoom and Teams and other technologies like that that people are familiar with. Just to pick up on something Rachel's just said, actually, unfortunately there's a tendency in many of the public discussions in the media to assume that teaching that's delivered remotely or in a blended form is not a good quality of teaching experience, but that's actually not the case. And like many other universities, we've got clear principles for designing high quality remote learning experiences that stress the importance of active learning, student interaction, and good quality feedback. And these are on our web pages to guide and support staff as they approach the design to teaching. So we will offer pre-recorded lectures in many instances, but we'll also offer many live sessions, small group discussions, and some peer-led activities using online tools that we often use during on-campus teaching to support students. And these are approaches that we were planning to use ever more in the future, even before COVID-19. I think just to finish, the important thing I would stress here is that our priority is to offer the same quality of education that we always strive to offer, even although the circumstances will be different. And creating a student-centred learning experience really is the focal point of all of our planning just now and of how we're adapting our teaching.
So we've had a question in, we've been talking about face-to-face and blended, but a question in from somebody saying, should we move to completely online teaching, at least for the first semester? And should lecture and seminar recordings be mandatory for all classes? Scott, is that something the SRC would be supportive of?
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously, given what I just said before, Peter, I'm highly sympathetic to students that are thinking about their education, primarily in terms of safety and the risk in their own circumstances, especially those who are international students. So generally speaking, yes, we'd be supportive, but obviously, as we have just said, there is going to be a blended approach to teaching, and it's really just trying to manage it on a case-by-case basis with student support, with the academic side, with admissions, to make sure that those who do fall outside of the cracks a little bit with the model that we're talking about are actually supported in a way which will enable them to learn. And it is a difficult one. It really is, because there'll be students, and there are students who have come up to us and said, we want to be taught on campus in its entirety. And obviously, as Moira said, that it won't be entirely possible. And then we're also getting students telling us that they want to be taught entirely online, and it's just trying to manage that as best as we can in order to deliver a world-class learning and teaching experience. And I must be perfectly honest, I don't think anything that we're going to be doing next year is entirely ideal, but that's the circumstances that we're in at the moment. We're in the middle of a pandemic. Nothing is going to be completely ideal, but we just need to make the best out of it as much as we can.
And Moira, in terms of the recording and mandatory recording, it's quite complicated, isn't it?
It can be. Yeah, so it's not always as straightforward as just pressing the record button on Zoom or Teams, that's true. We have just recently approved the opt-out lecture recording policy. So our intention is that the vast majority of lectures certainly would in the future be recorded. But the point behind the opt-out is that there are good reasons why it's not always appropriate to record a session. So it could be, for example, that topics that are being discussed are topics in which we want students to feel really comfortable and able to share personal insights. In lots of interactive sessions, students are forming their views and ideas and developing critical thinking and debating skills. And it could be that the possibility of that discussion being recorded would alter what they feel comfortable saying or arguing. You can contribute anonymously, of course. There's a chat function, and that can be really useful, but in small classes in particular, we want to get to know students and we want them to get to know each other. So that anonymous contribution doesn't always work in that context. So irrespective of whether it's an a remote delivery or an on-campus delivery, we want students to be comfortable to get to know each other, to debate and to understand one another. So if recording a session would impede the learning experience, then that wouldn't necessarily be desirable. But the fact remains that for lectures in particular, for the vast majority of those, it would be fairly straightforward to record them, and we're developing guidance for students and for staff so that they feel confident using these technologies, and so that we've got clear protocols around how we record them and how we manage those recordings, and actually how students make best use of them in their learning.
Well, a core part of the university is, of course, the library, our libraries. David Duncan, have we got any plans in hand to very quickly move to something like click and collect? That's something many students have been asking about in the short term. And then how will the libraries, the main library, all the other libraries be accessed in the medium to longer term in a safe way for physical use? Will it even be safe to touch books, we've been asked, for example?
So of course the University Library has been open throughout the pandemic online, and students and staff have been able to access the hundreds of thousands of electronic resources that we offer. But we also know that students and staff want to access the physical resources that the library offers too. And our colleagues in the library have been working very hard to prepare for this. As the lockdown eases, it's already eased to some extent. We expect the government to announce a further step, the Scottish Government to announce a further step later this week. Colleagues from the library have plans to go back into the library at some point in June, and about a week later we expect them to be able to offer a click and collect service. So staff, students, users of the library will be able to order books and materials through the catalogue, and then to pick them up from a point on the campus after that. And then perhaps about a month later, probably sometime in August, we expect to be able to open the library physically to users and to make available the study space in the library. There will be protocols applied. We will be applying whatever physical distancing rules are in place in Scotland at that time. Those will be applied strictly. There will be limits on the numbers that can enter the library at any given time, but it's a big library. There are lots of study spaces in it, and we expect to maximize the use of it in accordance with the physical distancing rules that are applying at that time.
And I suppose it goes back to what Ian was saying earlier on about the use of temperature devices or hand sanitizers. The whole kind of package was part of that. Of course, university isn't just about teaching and learning, good though it is, it's also the whole student experience. So Scott from the SRC, we've had one question in from Sorcha who asks, will the SRC provide information to clubs and societies on how Freshers Week is going to emerge this year? In fact, I suppose by implication, what other social activities will take place and how these will be facilitated. Can you help at all with that?
Sure, I can give a little bit of insight as to where we're currently at. I think just to start off, normally our planning for Freshers Week would happen a lot later in the year in relation to when our new sabbatical teams start. And we've actually had found ourselves as the outgoing sabbatical team due to finish at the end of the month, doing a lot of work for next year's Freshers Week when we're not even going to be here. So we're really trying to get ahead of the curve here. I suppose for clubs and societies, we are currently planning what Freshers Week will look like, and also a prolonged Freshers Week of activity, you know, past the normal week and a half or week that we normally have Freshers Week, kind of acknowledging that there's going to be staggered starts and you know, people maybe wanting to get involved in different activities, and we won't. The point being is we won't be able to have Freshers Week entirely in the way that we currently know it, but that's not to say we're not going to try. Obviously, there are social distancing guidelines and other rules like that we have to adhere to. So we're really just currently in the process of trying to establish what that will look like. So for clubs and societies, that information will come, and we're going to make sure to put together some kind of guidance, hopefully, that clubs and societies can follow, and also some information about how Freshers Week will look. I alluded just there. As I said, we're not imagining Freshers Week to look in the exact form that it currently does, given the current circumstances we are in. We're actually looking at extended Freshers Week, perhaps even across the semester, across both semesters, and having a prolonged period of a calendar of activity throughout the academic year. And again, this is something that we'll need to put into place with our new sabbatical team once they start in July, but we're really trying to think about unique and new ways of doing things, knowing that the student experience isn't entirely going to be exactly the same as what we're used to. Really just to manage expectation, it's really quite early for a lot of these conversations, so we will try to get that information out to students and clubs and societies as soon as we can, as soon as we have a framework for what we are planning put in place.
It has been a really difficult and very stressful time for staff, but also for students. And Sarah has been asking about student support, noting the announcement by the Scottish Government on student support recently. So Scott, can I ask you, do you think the university has been providing the right kind of support to students?
It's a quite interesting question, obviously, knowing that the SRC are an independent student body, but I think on the whole, I would probably agree that the answer to that is yes. There are, when we go back to the no detriment policy and how that supported students back in the exam period, to how students have been supported by the hardship fund, and obviously we've also had alumni donate to that fund, which has been very kind from our donating community. I think on the whole, the answer to that is yes. There are some things that we still need to work out, if I'm perfectly honest. We are all trying to work in an environment which is new to us. I've been sat at home for 6 weeks working by myself. We're never going to be as productive as we normally are, but I think there are still some things that we need to work out for next year. And Peter, from what you mentioned there, the university's put in place hardship funds. The Scottish Government have announced that there will be additional hardship funds made available to students. The idea behind that is really to find ways of trying to support students over the summer. We've been lobbying as the SRC with Scottish Government very recently about the fact that students are not going to have jobs over the summer on the whole, are not going to have access to finance past SAS payments being finished or SLC payments being finished. So we're going to open up some discussions with the student finance team here at the university to try figure out the best way of disseminating some of that money to students who really need it over the summer period. And I think that shows that students are being prioritised on the whole. Obviously, we're not able to do everything all at once. And I think there are still a lot of conversations that we need to have going into next semester, a lot of unknowns to be addressed.
Okay, the last section then of the broadcast now, we're going to have a look at some of the staff questions that have come in, and particularly ones for you, Christine Barr, Director of HR. Susan says, I'm worried I will need to take unpaid leave or reduce my hours to cope. Will the family first approach change with continued and prolonged home working?
Thanks, Peter, and hello everyone, and thank you very much for the question. I think the main thing from my point of view is the vast majority of us have been working remotely for some period of time, and that's likely to continue for the foreseeable future in accordance with the guidance that David referred to earlier. And the university will do everything it can to work with individuals and their circumstances and accommodate their needs as far as possible, and will continue to do that. Obviously, the vast majority of us have been working thus far, utilising our best endeavours to manage the operational requirements of our jobs whilst fulfilling other responsibilities, whether that be homeschooling, caring responsibilities and other such aspects. And of course, we would want the family first and family friendly policies to come into their own. I think it would be fair to say up until now, the widespread application of our policy provision has really been utilised around flexible and home working type provision, and particularly going forward for those that are shielding or vulnerable, or indeed living with those that fall into those categories, or indeed have caring responsibilities. We would urge them please to make use of our support for carers and the responsibilities that they have in addition to those that many of others of us have. That said, these policies are designed to flex according to different circumstances. We've already observed, families working different operational hours, working patterns, different locations, etc. And we would expect that to continue and for the foreseeable future as we move into this post kind of lockdown period and the relaxation of that as we go forward. Equally, encourage individuals where they do have particular circumstances to speak with their line managers in the first instance, because certainly there's plenty of support and guidance available, and we'll do what we can to accommodate.
Quite a large number of staff have been furloughed, and we have had some questions in about when you're on furlough, do you take annual leave? Can you take annual leave? Ought you to take annual leave? One questioner says, do we have to take a percentage of it by a certain time? If so, what percentage and by what date whilst on furlough? So there's a bit of confusion there. If you're on furlough, should you be taking annual leave?
I think it's a great question, and it's a very common question. And as I think hopefully everyone knows, our holiday year runs from the 1st of January to 31st of December every year. So in many ways, there's plenty of time, and we're about halfway through the holiday year as we speak. So, I mean, as you know, the university has done what it can to promote a healthy work-life balance and encouraging people to take a break, actually whether they're in furlough leave or not. What we have suggested is, and we would encourage everyone to do, is take 60 to 70% of their leave, if at all possible, by the end of September. But recognise that that might be challenging for some, and obviously seek that leave in the normal way that we do up till now in terms of core HR. But as others may be aware, and certainly it's on our facts, we have increased the number of days we can carry over into next calendar year from 5 to 10. So hopefully that will make a little bit of a difference. But that's the ballpark within which people will be asked to operate. But largely speaking, individuals would ask them to take a responsible approach and make sure they have a break.
We've got an anonymous question that's come in about promotions, quite simply asking, will promotions be frozen in the current climate?
A hugely topical question. I've been asked it on a number of occasions this week, and as we're aware, we've proceeded with the academic promotion round this session, both in terms of the application process itself and indeed any title change that comes therefrom and the remuneration accordingly. And I know that that's not the case in other universities. I have to confirm that we're not in a position just yet to determine what the arrangements are for next year, but we have a working group set up for that purpose. And we'll certainly keep everyone appraised. And the purpose of the working group is to ensure that we mitigate and effectively minimise any potential inequalities or indeed unintended consequences that arise from the COVID-19 pandemic. So watch this space. More to follow.
Thank you. A couple of final questions just as we come to the end. Principal, this is one we were asked at the last Q&A in May, but Joseph and Anali are asking, has any decision been made about winter graduations? And if not, when can we expect a decision about winter graduations?
Well, thank you, Joseph and Analia. It's a really important question because I know just how much graduations mean to our graduating students. The simple answer is no. And the reason for that is simply we don't know how the pandemic will evolve. Clearly, if the current physical distancing rules continue to apply, and they continue to apply by the end of November, we won't be able to have graduations in the conventional way. So we will probably need to postpone them to a time when we could. But we are trying not to take that decision immediately, but to give ourselves a little bit of time to see exactly how the crisis evolves, to see whether there will be an opportunity to hold them as normal. And obviously what we'll do, I can't give you a time when we'll take that decision, but we'll do it in plenty of time so that families and graduates making their plans, their travel plans, will be able to do that at least 2 or 3 months ahead. So towards the end of the summer, we hope to get to the point that we'll make a decision on that.
Scott Kirby from the SRC.
We've been working quite hard to represent students, as one of the biggest issues around graduations is the ability to ensure that students actually do get them at some point, and we're confident that that will happen at some point. Again, we need to work within the confines of what the government guidance is all about, and we're also working with the graduation team and people like the Clerk of Senate to ensure that some meaningful things are put in place for students in the meantime until they actually do get their graduation. So we will make sure to continue working for that, because if I'm quite honest, our students this year have gone through a hell of a year, and we really want to ensure that their graduations happen and they are commended for what they've had to go through this year in order to graduate. So.
And the final question, we might not be having physical graduations this summer, but I know that we are going to have online celebrations. Principal, over to you and what we can expect on online graduations this summer, or online celebrations.
Well, yeah, thanks, Peter. And Scott already mentioned that we are going to try and make it as memorable as possible. And clearly, we've already promised that this year's graduates will be able to have their own graduation ceremony at some point next year, probably, the way things are going. But this year, we're planning a week of celebrations. We're trying to create a virtual celebration. I know that there will be messages from a number of people, myself, others involved. And I think we're trying to make it as special as possible in what we give our students together with their graduation certificate. Look, I mean, Scott said it all. Really, it's not been a great year for our students who are hoping to have their climax of their graduation at the end of June, beginning of July. So we really want to make it as special as possible. Can I also thank all my colleagues and all the students who have already started celebrating online. You see a lot in our social media already of student groups, or indeed some of our schools and institutes have been celebrating graduations. So again, I hope that this, plus what we are doing at university level, will make students feel special, because what they've achieved is absolutely tremendous.
Thank you very much. Well, time as ever is against us, so finally want to thank today's panel, the Principal, Professor Sir Anton Muscatelli, Dr. David Duncan, the Chief Operating Officer and University Secretary, Scott Kirby, President of the SRC, Christine Barr, Director of Human Resources, Rachel Sandison, Vice Principal External Relations, Ian Campbell, Executive Director of Estates, and Moira Fischbacher-Smith, Vice Principal Learning and Teaching. We've tried to get through as many questions as possible, and the recording is going to be made available on our web pages. Remember, as Rachel said and others, that support, guidance, and lots of FAQs are there on the website. Please go there. Come and talk to us if you've got questions beyond that. We'll try and be sympathetic as we can. The SRC also has masses of additional resources that you can also access. So thanks to the panel. Thanks very much to you for watching. And most importantly, please to everybody, take care of yourself and take care of those around you. Thank you.